Excuse us, but what does this have to do with anything?
Well, my friends, you're about to find out.
Hello there, I'm Shannon Schwarzinger, and I'm here to talk to you today about the U.S. Dietary Guidelines, what they entail specifically, how they affect us both directly and indirectly, and then how they compare with other countries' guidelines. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, in conjunction with the U.S. Department of Agriculture, publish the Dietary Guidelines for Americans every 5 years. These updates are established based on current peer-reviewed research, retrospective analysis, and current health issues of the nation. The dietary guidelines are used by public health agencies, healthcare providers, and educational institutions. School lunches are a major area that is directly impacted by the guidelines. The menus are set and food distributions are affected by these same guidelines. Two other vital areas that are directly impacted are the military and food stamps. Military rations adhere to the dietary guidelines, and SNAP only allows for certain items to be purchased. The indirect effect of the guidelines is also far-reaching, and we see it every day. Marketing is everywhere, and what we have been told is quote-unquote healthy has changed over the years based on these guidelines. Examples of this can be seen in marketing campaigns covering all areas of the media. In the 1990s, to promote dairy consumption in relation to updated dietary guidelines, the marketing campaign Got Milk became a household catchphrase. A more modern form of the quote-unquote healthy adherence to the guidelines can be seen in the marketing of egg whites and decreased cholesterol eggs. So what are the most current guidelines? The American Dietary Guidelines are broken into multiple facets: 5 healthy eating habits, key recommendations, and specific food group intake recommendations. Out of these recommendations, they all can be summed up in specific food group quantity recommendations for a 2,000 kcal diet, which are as follows. For vegetables, 2.5 cups of vegetables are recommended per day. Across 5 subgroups, these subgroups are dark greens, red and orange, legumes, starches, and others. Each of these subgroups should be included in the weekly diet rotation without adding salt, butter, or creamy sauces. For fruits, they are about 2 cup equivalents per day. This group includes whole fruits and 100% fruit juice, with at least half of the recommended amounts coming from the whole fruits. When juices are consumed, only the percentage of juice is credited towards a fruit serving. Young children should consume no more than 4 to 6 ounces of juice per day. Grains are to be consumed in 6-ounce equivalents per day, with at least half of this amount coming from whole grains. Limiting refined grains is advised. Whole grains include the entire kernel, endosperm, bran, and germ. Refined grains remove the bran and germ, which removes dietary fiber, iron, and other nutrients. If refined grains are to be eaten, enriched grains should be chosen. These grains are fortified with vitamins and minerals. For dairy, you want 3 cup equivalents per day from a fat-free or low-fat dairy product. For proteins, you want 5.5 ounces of protein foods per day. This can include animal and plant sources such as seafood, meat, poultry, eggs, nuts, seeds, legumes, and soy products. There is a specific recommendation for at least 8-ounce equivalents of protein coming from a source of seafood per week. Seeds and nuts should be limited to 1 ounce equivalents per day due to high calorie and high fat content. Poultry and meat should be eaten in leaner forms. The recommendations for plant-based oils is 5 teaspoons per day in order to provide essential fatty acids as well as vitamin E. The recommendations for sugar before 2015 was to simply limit the amount of added sugar in one's diet. But since 2015, the recommendations have been given quantifiable values. Currently, it is recommended to limit added sugars to less than 10% of daily calories. So in a 2,000 calorie diet, it is recommended to have less than 200 calories from added sugars. This decrease in sugar has led to increase in popularity of sugar substitutes, of which long-term studies have yet to be conducted. Saturated fats should be less than 10% of the total kcals per day. Trans fats should be limited to as little as possible. In 2010, the limit for cholesterol was set at 300 milligrams per day. That is not included in the 2015 dietary guidelines. It is recommended to limit total dietary cholesterol as possible, but there are no longer set guidelines for it. For sodium, the recommended intake is less than 2,300 milligrams per day due to evidence in linear dose-response relationships between increased sodium intake and increased blood pressure in adults. Several countries were chosen as samples to compare dietary guidelines in contrast to the Dietary Guidelines of America. These countries were specifically chosen based on prevalence of overweight and obesity rates, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease in comparison with America's. The countries chosen include Benin, China, Ireland, the United Kingdom, and Qatar. Benin and China display some of the lowest prevalence of conditions and diseases stated above, with Benin displaying the lowest prevalence of diabetes in the world. Ireland and the United Kingdom were selected as they share similar disease prevalence as the United States. Qatar was picked as it displays some of the highest disease prevalence rates for diabetes, obesity, and cardiovascular disease. Now we're going to delve into each country's dietary guidelines, starting with Benin. Now, Benin is not as structured as the United States is. The guidelines recommend eating quote-unquote plenty of vegetables, consuming fish frequently, eating fruits every day, limiting the amount of oil and fat used to cook with, avoiding high-salt meals, and drinking sugary drinks in moderation, and getting 30 minutes of physical activity each day. Carbohydrates were not specifically mentioned in the dietary guidelines of Benin. The dietary guidelines list their largest food groups as 1. Vegetables, 2. Grains, 3. Proteins and fruits at the end. The difference in each food group did not vary much, with vegetables and grains being about 4 to 6 servings per day and protein and fruits at 2 to 3 servings per day. The Chinese dietary guidelines are broken up into calories, the grains making up a majority of the calories at 250 to 400 calories per day, with vegetables and fruits following close behind, and sometimes exceeding with vegetables at 300 to 500 calories per day and fruits at 200 to 350 calories per day. The Chinese dietary guidelines are measured in grams, with fruits and vegetables making up the largest portion at 300 to 500 grams. Grains following close behind at 250 to 400 grams, fruits at 200 to 350 grams per day. Protein is broken up into separate categories for fish, lean meats, and eggs, but totals up to 120 to 200 grams per day. Dairy is said not to exceed 300 grams per day, while water is recommended to be consuming 1,500 to 1,700 milliliters per day, with a limitation of oils and sugars. Now, let's head on over to Ireland. Ireland states that 5 to 7 servings of vegetables and fruits should form the base of their pyramid. Grains range from 3 to 5 servings per day, with men ranging up to 7 servings per day. Dairy is the middle of the pyramid with 3 servings per day, followed by the protein at 2 servings per day. Lastly, oils and sugars should be consumed as little as possible. Now, on over to UK, they recommend that a combination of vegetables and fruits make up the largest portions of your food group, with at least 5 servings of combined vegetables and fruits per day. Grains is the largest single food category of per day servings, providing the quote-unquote basis of the diet. Protein and dairy make up a small portion of the daily serving sizes, with oils and sugars being, as you guessed it, as limited as possible. Now, onto our final country, Qatar. They recommend that vegetables should be 3 to 5 servings per day, fruits 2 to 4 servings per day, with carbohydrates no specific recommendation, but it does appear to be the greatest food group in the daily intake. Legumes have their own individual food group and are recommended to be eaten daily with no quantifiable recommendation specifically. Meat and fish is advised to be eaten about twice a week with no more than 500 grams per week. Dairy is recommended 3 to 4 servings per day, and the dietary guidelines recommending limiting sugar, fat, and salt, with sugar being suggested, limiting it at about 100 grams per day. All right, I'm back to sum it all up. So, based off of some of these countries' guidelines, it's evident that the environment, social structure, geographic location, culture, food availability all play a vital role or a very important role in how these regulations were created and these dietary recommendations were set forth. Let me just say that the main takeaway of this is everything in moderation, from fat to salt to sugar to carbs to protein. Having a well-rounded diet is going to be your best bet. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.